Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. This project contains working with MySQL and running some SQL queries to have better insight about the data. This dataset is just a slice of the overall COVID dataset. The COVID dataset is one of the most popular datasets, at least from 2 years till now. Since COVID dataset is a very big and a large dataset, I just made a slice and I'm going to work on this dataset. You can see here, let me to increase the size. There are some columns, for example, the continent, the location or the countries, the date, the population of each country, how many people infected in this day, how many people dead in this day, and how many people vaccinated in this day. I mean, these columns are based on daily basis and they are not total. This column is a population for each country. For example, the Australia, this data is repeated till we go to the next country. The next country is Brazil, and the data population is changed, and as well as this, the continent or other information. Overall, we have 6,347 records. So in this project, first of all, I'm going to convert or export this data to MySQL, and after that run some queries to answer some questions. Let's do it. For importing the CSV file in MySQL, first of all, we should create a database. For doing this, I just click on a database and it is the new schema. I leave the name because it doesn't matter. You can write whatever you want. I create apply, and after that you can see there are a predefined SQL query. They create a schema, and if I apply, you can see here the new schema is generated. However, we don't have any table or any data. For doing this, I just right click and go to Table Data Import Wizard. I click on it, and after that, if I browse, I can select the data or the file that I want. I just need to import CSV, either JSON. I just click on a browse, and here this is my dataset. I open and I click on a next. You can see the name of the data, for example, the info in this schema. I click on a drop table if exists. It means if any table in this schema exists with this name, drop the previous one, and instead of that create the new one. I go to next, and it is the data type that are recognized based on every value in this variable. If I click on the next, the data process for importing the data begins. But since it takes time, I did this process before, and it is, I drop this schema, I drop it. It is the data. I create a database as a COVID, and the table that I imported is the info, and it is the data type. Let's see the data. It is the data that I imported exactly based on the Excel file that we see. Before running any query in SQL, we should declare the database. The database is COVID, and I just need to write use. I prefer to caps lock. Use COVID as a data. I run it, and now the COVID is selected. So it means after this time, I don't need to call the database over and over again. Because first of all, I'm going to say I'm using the COVID dataset. The first question is asking what is the likelihood of a person who would be died in case of she has been infected? It means what is the probability that if a person infected COVID-19 to be died? For answering these questions, we must see the proportion of being infected and being dead. First of all, let's select the data from the table. I want to select let me to open the table. I want to select the location, the date here, and no, maybe we don't need date because this question is asking the infection, the location, and the population, or the dead and infected. So even we don't need location because this question is not asking about the country, just location, dead, just population, dead and infected. So maybe instead of population, yeah, it's good to use location as deleted wrongly. Yeah, location, dead and infected. So this data comes from the info, the name of the database, and let's see the data so far. Yes, it is the data, and it is the dead and it is the infected. So for having better insight, it is better to call date as well. Yeah, now let's run the code. The question is asking about the proportion of the being affected and what is the probability that being affected to be died. So for doing this, I call a sum, and in this sum I just create a sum of dead and sum of infected. First of all, sum of dead, and after that sum of infected. So, and then I can group by so because I have a sum, I don't need the infected and dead, just date and location, group by this, and I want to order the data by or their data based on the location and date, or location and date. So let's see the data so far. Yes, it is the data in Australia. In this time, the sum of dead is 0, but sum of infected, specifically in this date, is this number. Because the group by is based on the location and date, so it means this data would be repeated for every single country because the first group is based on the location. But for group by, I think we don't need to group based on the date because we want to see the overall probability. So I just need to delete it. Oops, there is an error. Oh yeah, group by, yeah. We don't have any date, yeah. The sum of the dead in Australia is this, and the sum of the infected in Australia is, yeah, this data makes sense compared to the previous one, because in the previous one we grouped the data based on the date, so you know it didn't make sense. So I want to divide the dead by infected. Some of the dead should be divided by some of the infected, and I want to times its percent because I see the percentage, and I want to call it as, for example, deaths infected likelihood, and let's see the data. Yeah, for example, in Australia, per every 100 people that are infected by COVID, just 3 people were died. But about the India, it is very amazing. Per every 100 people infected by COVID-19, just 1 person was died. And it is very interesting. What about the worst country? It is just China. In China, per every 100 people who were infected by COVID-19, 4 people dead. And you can see, for example, let's see the Canada, where, for example, the location, like, let's convert the where, like Canada. Let's the data about the Canada. Yeah, the rate for Canada is less, and for every 100 people that's infected by COVID-19, just around 2 people were dead. So it is just the data about how we can see the probability of being dead based on the infected by COVID-19. Now let's see the next question. The next question is look like the previous question, but this time we want to see what is the probability of being dead in case that the people were vaccinated. So let's see the data. I just need to copy and just change something. For example, the dead is needed because we want to see how many people dead. Just instead of infected, I just need to vaccinated, and here, and let's change it to vaccinated. Let's see the data. Yeah. For example, in Australia, per every 100 people that were vaccinated, just this number dead. And it is very good news about this country. But what about the other country? For example, I want to order based on this. Let's see. Yeah, and it is the least number. The least number was China. In the previous answer, in the previous question, let's see the previous one. The previous is this. Let's see the ascending. If you remember, the China was the worst one. Maybe it was the least one. Yeah, you can see in China, the greatest number was for China, about the people who were infected that dead. And here, if I run this code, and here the China had the best condition about the vaccinated people, and they were survived. It means even though the China accounts for the highest number of deaths compared to other countries, but when the China began to vaccinate people, the number of the deaths reduced. and this reduction was significantly. But what about the worst condition? The worst condition was about the Iran. In Iran, this number of people were vaccinated, but 71,000 people were dead. And there is a big difference between Iran and Netherlands with other countries. However, the differences between Iran and Netherlands was so high. It means the Iranian government couldn't, take some measures to have a better vaccination for their people, even though they tried a lot for vaccinate people. Those vaccinations cannot help the reduction of a death rate. However, as we can see, the condition for China was completely better compared to other countries. Now let's see the next question. The next question is asking, what is the probability that being vaccinated and after that being infected? This question is very good to see how efficient that vaccination was in every country. So I just need to change something. The query is the same. For doing this, I want to change dead as an infected, and the vaccinated is okay, and just change to infected. And it is infected vaccinated. I change it here. Maybe I don't need it. Yeah, I call it, and this is the results. Again, Iran was the worst one. It makes sense because if we can see in the previous questions, that was about the relationship between vaccinations and death. We see that Iran was the worst, so it makes sense. Again, about the vaccination and infected. So this table says, in Iran, this number of people vaccinated and this number of people infected. So it means the vaccination in Iran was not good because people were vaccinated, however, they were infected again. But what about the best country? The best country was China. And again, based on the previous question, we see that China was the best. So generally speaking, means the vaccination in China was the best all around the world, and vaccination in Iran was the worst all around the world. But let's see the data based on the population. Because we can just make a comparison between countries based on the population, because the population in China and India are much more than other countries. Let's see the data about the population. We see the death rate in Iran was the worst and in the China was the best. But let's compare with the population. So for doing this, I just copy here. So we need to have a population because we want to see the population. So about the infected, we don't need the infected, just dead, and we don't need the vaccinated. I just need to sum dead. Oh, here some dead in the population, and it is the highest rate, and this one based on the location should be group. I call it, oh, there is a wrong Yeah, I just need to put the population here, and now it should work. Yeah. So again, the China compared to population, China was the least number of people that were dead. So, and about the worst country, the Brazil, compared to population. In the previous question, we see the vaccination in Iran was the worst. But when we compare with the population, we see the Brazil was the worst country. So it makes sense because the population in Brazil is much more than population in Iran. However, the criteria might be different. In this project, we have a highlight and overview about the data, and we could analyze which countries had the best performance in vaccination and which countries don't have.